Good evening, wherever you're watching from. You arrive with end-of-day weight in your shoulders, and you choose, bravely, lazily, wisely, to let someone else steer for a while. Tonight you drift toward Rapa Nui, where dusk begins in torchlight on black rock and the sea breathes slow, salt-bright air. The carving songs are already waiting, and you probably won't survive this the way you expect. Your grip on being fine loosens, and the quiet wins. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You breathe out, slower than you have all day, and the scene settles around you. You stand on Rapa Nui at dusk, where the Pacific stretches dark and glossy, and the horizon holds a thin seam of fading apricot. The ground under you is volcanic stone, uneven, warm in places, sharp-edged in others, so you step carefully, as if the island is teaching your body to slow down before your mind can argue. Torches flicker along a path that curves with the coast. Each flame leans in the wind, then finds itself again, and the light moves over the rocks in soft amber sweeps. It doesn't glare, it flatters. It lets you be a silhouette instead of a person who must perform. Salt air rests on your skin like a clean film, and the ocean's breath comes in long pulls and releases, steady enough to borrow. A song reaches you before you see its source. It is not a show, it is a rhythm made for work, low, repeating, calm, like a lullaby that refuses to be precious. The cadence gathers your scattered attention and lines it up gently with what is happening ahead. You follow without thinking too hard, because thinking too hard is exactly what you came here to stop doing. Around the bend, a circle of torchlight holds its ground against the dark. Several locals sit or kneel near the shoreline, close enough to the sea that the air tastes brighter, close enough to the fire that faces glow and then soften into shadow again. Tools rest beside them on flat stones, smooth-handled mallets, chisels, scrapers, simple shapes made complicated by how carefully they are treated. Someone adjusts a torch and the flame steadies, as if it respects the hands that asked. At the center, a pale block of volcanic rock waits, dusted with fine powder. Hands move over it with a kind of listening, brushing, tracing, pausing, then returning to the same spot as if the stone has spoken quietly. The song continues, and the work answers it. Tap, scrape, pause, tap, scrape, pause. The pauses feel intentional, almost sacred, the way you pause before stepping onto a boat. You hang back at first because your body remembers being in the way. Still, you are noticed, not interrogated, just included. Space opens with small gestures, a shift of knees, a tool moved aside, a place at the edge of the light that says, "You may exist here without explanation." Relief moves through you in a slow wave, like warmth finally reaching your fingers. Smoke drifts past, sweet, bitter, and gentle, and for a second stone dust sparks in the torchlight like tiny stars. The ocean keeps breathing behind everyone, stitching sound to silence. You begin to understand what the song is doing. It isn't decoration, it is a tool. It keeps the hand steady. It keeps the mind from racing ahead into fear or pride. It makes labor into something you can live inside, rather than something that consumes you. The wind tests the flames again. They bend, they recover. You think about the lights you live under most days, bright, constant, demanding, and how different this feels. Torchlight flickers. It forgives. It doesn't pretend to be permanent. It simply keeps returning, small and steady, and that steadiness is enough to make your chest unclench. You watch the careful motions repeat. Tool rises, touches, withdraws, dust brushed away, surface revealed a little more each time. Nobody forces the stone, nobody hurries the night. The island seems to approve of patience the way the sea approves of tides, by continuing, by returning, by not needing applause. And without realizing when it happens, you arrive not only on land, but inside your own body. Your thoughts quiet, your breathing matches the song's slow loop. Dusk deepens, torches whisper, and you accept your first lesson on Rapa Nui. The day doesn't end here. It is gently reshaped by firelight, by rhythm, by hands that know how to listen, into something you can finally rest inside. The song follows you even after you step back from the circle, as if the rhythm has quietly hooked itself behind your ribs and refuses to leave. Torchlight stretches ahead along the coastal track, and you move into it with the slow care you just learned, feet searching for stable rock, shoulders remembering how to drop. The night air cools by degrees, not suddenly, the way a patient teacher corrects you without making a scene. A few locals walk with you, not as guards, not as tour guides performing for a rating, but as hosts who understand that new arrivals misread distance on volcanic ground. Their presence is calm and practical. They choose the path that looks least dramatic, which is exactly the point. Here, the island does not reward your urge to rush, and it definitely does not reward your urge to prove you can handle everything. The stones underfoot change texture every few steps. A smooth slab means you can place your weight confidently. A darker patch means sea damp and the possibility of a quiet personal embarrassment. A scatter of pebbles means slow down and let your toes do their job. It's faintly annoying. Your whole life is built around flat floors and pretending that paying attention to the ground is optional, but you adjust because the rock does not negotiate with denial. Above you, the sky opens wider than you're used to. Clouds thin out, and the stars appear not as decoration, but as a working map. The torches sway in the wind, but the constellations hold steady, and that contrast steadies you too. You stop seeing the night as a blank. You start seeing it as a structure. Inland, the land rises into low slopes, sleeping shapes against the sky. The contour of the island becomes a compass, a ridge to your left, a dip of land ahead, the sea always breathing on your right. Orientation here isn't a set of instructions, it's a relationship. You keep track of where the wind touches you, where the salt smell thickens, where the torch smoke thins. Your body stores these details before your mind even decides they matter. The wind itself becomes information. It arrives in steady lanes, funneling between rock outcrops, then easing where the ground dips. You notice how the torches lean, how their flames flatten and recover, and you begin to read the gusts the way you read someone's mood without needing to name it. When the breeze presses from the ocean, you know you're still on the coastal side. When it shifts and cools from inland, you know the land has turned you, even if your eyes haven't admitted it yet. The path narrows, then widens, then narrows again. In places, low stone walls shoulder the trail, stacks of dark rock that look casual until you realize how intentionally they're placed. They break the wind, they hold the earth in place, they mark where a person has decided carefully that life belongs here. Your hand drifts toward one wall as you pass, fingertips brushing cool stone. It's the kind of touch you don't broadcast because it isn't impressive, but it settles something in you anyway. Torches are spaced just far enough apart to create alternating chambers of light and darkness. Step into the light and the ground clarifies. Sharp edges, pale dust, a thread of grass. Step into the dark and everything softens, as if the island is giving your eyes permission to rest. You start timing your breathing with those transitions, because of course you do. When you can't control your day, you control your inhale. The island lets you have that. The walkers do not fill the air with chatter. Their quiet is not awkward, it's functional. Sound travels differently here. The ocean constant, the wind threading through grasses, the faint crackle of torches. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space for noticing. You hear your own footsteps, and they sound honest. You hear a seabird somewhere out over the dark water, a single call that seems to hang in the air longer than it should. At a bend, the path climbs slightly. The sea drops lower in your peripheral vision, and the horizon line changes. It's a tiny adjustment, but it teaches you something important. On an island, a few meters of elevation changes your whole sense of where you are. The locals pause just long enough for you to register it. No ceremony, just shared awareness. You let your eyes recalibrate, and you feel your mind do the same. You keep going, and the stars thicken as if the sky is getting bold. The Milky Way looks less like a myth and more like spilled ash. You pick one bright point and keep it in your sight line, a quiet anchor the way the torch circle was your anchor earlier. Your body relaxes into the idea that direction can be gentle. By the time the path levels out again, you're no longer walking like someone who is trying to arrive. You're walking like someone who is already held. The island's contours, the wind's pressure, the alternating light, the deliberate quiet, these are not obstacles, they are guides. They lead tired bodies home without demanding a performance, and you let them. You keep that steady star in the corner of your vision as the path drifts inland, and the ocean's breath becomes a softer backdrop, like a blanket pulled higher over your ears. The torches thin out, just enough darkness to make you trust your feet, then reappear, spaced like patient commas in a long sentence. The locals with you move with the quiet confidence of people who have never had to pretend the ground is harmless. The land rises and the air changes. Salt is still present, but it's braided with dry grass and the faint mineral scent of warm rock. Your lungs notice before your thoughts do. You inhale, and it tastes like old rain stored in stone, like ash that has long since forgiven its own fire. Dusk doesn't end here. It settles into an agreement between sky and earth. Ahead, a crater rim gathers itself against the stars. The slope is gentle but insistent, and you climb without heroics, because the island has already cured you of the urge to perform for no audience. Your steps become quieter, as if the ground is asking for respect. Even the torches burn with more restraint, their flames low and steady, protecting their warmth from the wind. When you crest the rise, the quarry opens below you. It doesn't look like a workplace in the way you're used to. There are no bright panels, no frantic beeps, no floodlights flattening everything into efficient visibility. Instead, the landscape spreads out like a sleeping animal, dark, broad-backed, breathing slowly. The inner slopes are cut with pale scars where stone has been taken, and exposed faces catch torchlight in soft planes, like cheekbones in a dim room. Near the center, a small bowl of water holds a thin reflection of sky, still as a held breath. You descend along a narrow track that zigzags down the inner slope. The crater shelters the air, and the torches burn straighter. Darkness gathers in hollows, and it feels thicker, more intimate. Every sound sharpens, the whisper of a sandal on gravel, the small crackle of resin, the distant hush of the sea now softened into background. As you reach the lower terraces, shapes emerge in the half-light, forms that are not quite rock and not quite anything else. Along the slope, partially carved figures lie embedded in the stone, their outlines softened by night. Some seem to rise from the hillside, others seem to sink back into it, as if the earth is holding them for later. You look carefully, not greedily, and your appetite for spectacle quietly loses interest. The group slows near a broad face of exposed stone. Tools are set down with a gentleness that borders on affection. Hands brush dust from a flat surface, and torchlight reveals faint markings. Guides, yes, but also possibilities. You expect carving. What you witness first instead is listening. A palm rests on the rock for a long moment, still and patient. Fingers trace a seam where the grain changes. An ear leans close, not for sound in the ordinary sense, but for vibration, for the subtle feedback of texture and density. Someone taps lightly with a knuckle, then waits, as if the stone's answer arrives after a beat. The quarry responds through firmness and fault lines, through the way a surface resists in one place and yields in another. Here the material is clean and obedient. There it is brittle. Your own body responds too. Your shoulders loosen, as if they've been waiting for permission. Your hand drifts toward the stone, and you hesitate, trained to treat sacred things as untouchable, and trained to treat work as something you rush through. Both instincts feel wrong here. You touch the rock anyway, fingertips first, and it is cool beneath the torch warmth, steady and honest. The surface is fine-grained, almost velvety in places, rougher where it has been freshly opened. Dust clings to your skin, fine as flour, and you let it be there a moment. The stone itself is lighter than the coastal rock, softer under the tool, volcanic tough that gives if you ask correctly and punishes you if you demand. It is the kind of material that makes arrogance look tired fast. The island does not negotiate with denial. Torches are repositioned to graze the surface at an angle, and shadows do what shadows do best. They reveal. Light becomes a diagnostic tool, not a spotlight. Hands select a chisel not because it is the sharpest, but because its edge matches the curve the stone is willing to give. The first strikes are almost apologetic. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Dust falls in soft puffs, and each puff is brushed away immediately, as if the work is embarrassed to be messy. Time softens with you inside it. Nothing demands a reaction. You begin to understand why this place feels alive. It isn't because the stone moves, it's because the people refuse to treat it as dead. They approach it the way you wish someone would approach you when you're exhausted, with patience, with attention, with the assumption that forcing will only break something that could have held. A breeze slides down the crater wall and slips past your neck, cool as water. The torches flicker once, then steady. Above the rim, stars watch without judgment. Below, the quarry carries its quiet weight, and you stand inside that hush, learning, slowly, finally, what it feels like to listen before you shape. You stay in the quarry's hush, and the longer you stand there, the more you notice what doesn't happen. No one lunges at the stone. No one bullies the night with urgency. The work floats on a slow current. Tap, pause, brush. Tap, pause, brush. And you begin to understand that the pauses are not breaks. They are part of the craft, the same way silence is part of a lullaby. A torch is shifted, and its light slides toward a low platform of rock set slightly apart from the carving face. Here the air smells less of dust and more of resin and old wood. Tools lie in a deliberate order, not because anyone is obsessed with tidiness, but because disorder makes hands frantic. The locals drift toward this station with the same respect they bring to the stone itself, and you follow because your body has already learned that this island rewards attention, not improvisation. Up close, the tools stop being equipment and become personalities. Heavy basalt picks, toki, sit with their dark heads worn smooth where fingers have held them for years. Slimmer chisels rest beside them, edges dressed carefully, handles polished by use. Scrapers look almost modest until you notice how precise their curves are. A coil of fiber cord waits in a tidy loop, and a small bundle of dried plant strips sits nearby like quiet bandages for tired gear. A hand lifts one toki and turns it slowly in torchlight. You expect a quick glance, the way you check your phone battery with a single anxious stare. Instead, you watch a ritual. Thumb pads trace the edge, knuckles test the balance. The stone head is tapped lightly against another rock to listen for a clean ring. The sound is soft but decisive. A dull note hints at a hidden fracture, a future failure. A clear note means the tool will hold when asked. There is plenty of stone in the quarry, but there is no appetite for wasting it. Someone draws an edge along an abrasive slab. Steady, angled strokes, unhurried. Pale dust gathers in a crescent and is brushed away immediately, as gently as sweeping crumbs from a table you care about. You find yourself watching the sharpening the way you watched the torches earlier, a repeated motion that calms you precisely because it refuses to show off. Up close, the tools stop being equipment and become personalities. Heavy basalt picks, toki, sit with their dark heads worn smooth where fingers have held them for years. Slimmer chisels rest beside them, edges dressed carefully, handles polished by use. Scrapers look almost modest until you notice how precise their curves are. A coil of fiber cord waits in a tidy loop, and a small bundle of dried plant strips sits nearby like quiet bandages for tired gear. A hand lifts one toki and turns it slowly in torchlight. You expect a quick glance, the way you check your phone battery with a single anxious stare. Instead, you watch a ritual. Thumb pads trace the edge, knuckles test the balance. The stone head is tapped lightly against another rock to listen for a clean ring. The sound is soft but decisive. A dull note hints at a hidden fracture, a future failure. A clear note means the tool will hold when asked. There is plenty of stone in the quarry, but there is no appetite for wasting it. Someone draws an edge along an abrasive slab, steady, angled strokes, unhurried. Pale dust gathers in a crescent and is brushed away immediately, as gently as sweeping crumbs from a table you care about. You find yourself watching the sharpening the way you watched the torches earlier, a repeated motion that calms you precisely because it refuses to show off. As you keep smoothing the handle, you notice how everyone's pace aligns, not by command, but by rhythm. The same gentle tempo you heard by the shore seems to hover here too, faint but persistent. It paces the sharpening strokes, it paces the wrapping, it even paces the brushing away of dust. No dialogue is needed to feel the agreement. This is how you stay safe in the dark. This is how you respect the stone. This is how you keep your hands from turning careless. Your breathing falls into that rhythm, and something inside you eases. You think about how often you treat your own tools, literal or metaphorical, as disposable. You push your body, then act surprised when it asks for rest. You burn through attention, then act offended when it slips. The island has a gentler policy. It assumes everything that matters needs care. Not once, not ceremonially, but repeatedly, as a practice. When the handle finally feels quiet under your fingers, smooth, ready, forgiving, you wipe it clean and set it back among the other tools. It sits there like it belongs. Torchlight flickers, then steadies again, and you understand the real craft being taught at this small station. Not only carving stone, but carving patience, soft, disciplined, and stubborn enough to last. The handle you smooth returns to the tool line like it has always belonged there, and that quiet sense of readiness spreads into you. Torches are checked again, wicks nudged, resin-fed flames coaxed into steadier shapes, and then the group begins to move, carrying the quarry's discipline out into the wider night. You climb the crater path in slow, sure steps. Behind you, the quarry settles into darkness, holding its pale scars and sleeping forms. Above the rim, stars feel sharper, as if your eyes have finally stopped insisting on brightness. At the top, the wind greets you with cool insistence, and the torches lean with it, then recover. The route bends toward the coast. The sea's breath returns, saltier, louder, endlessly patient, like a rhythm you didn't realize you were missing. As you descend, the ground fractures into shelves and ridges that catch torchlight in bright seams and then vanish again. You adjust your pace automatically because the island has been very clear. If you move like you're late, the rock will correct you. Ahead, a low rise lifts against the last trace of dusk, and you begin to sense a shape that doesn't belong to the hillside. It is too upright, too deliberate. The locals slow without announcing it. Their shoulders settle, their torch hands lower, angling light to the path instead of the horizon, as if what waits ahead is not meant to be flooded with attention. When you crest the rise, you find an ahu, an ancient platform of fitted stone,
dark blocks stacked with a calm, stubborn logic. Torchlight grazes the surface and reveals seams so tight the stones seem grown together rather than placed. The structure sits close to the coast, braced against wind and spray, and the air around it feels subtly different, quieter, with restraint. Beyond the platform, a moai stands in half-light. It is less a statue than a presence. The torch's edge catches a thin band of face, brow ridge, long nose, the quiet line of lips that refuses to perform for you. The rest is shadow, tall and patient. You notice with a small inward jolt that it faces inland. The watchers here look toward the people, toward where daily worries actually happen. It isn't a scenic backdrop for the ocean. It is a steady regard turned homeward. You keep your distance because your body understands before your mind does that closeness is earned. Your steps quiet, your breathing slows. The locals move with practiced respect. They avoid climbing onto the platform. They step around certain stones. They let the light skim rather than glare. Reverence isn't announced, it is simply practiced. You walk along the length of the ahu, and more silhouettes emerge, other moai spaced like a slow procession. Some appear crisp against the night, others are softened by weather, as if time has been gently stroking their faces for centuries. You think of the quarry's rhythm, tap, pause, brush, and how the same patience lives here, only stretched across generations. A torch swings slightly, and for a moment a crown of red stone appears on one figure's head, a heavy topknot, a darker warmth against the black. Your modern brain tries to grab it, label it, file it away as interesting, as if naming is the same as understanding. The island invites a quieter move. Let it remain what it is, a marker of identity and care, without demanding you turn it into trivia. Below the cliff, the sea keeps speaking in long, regular phrases. Waves fold into rock, withdraw, return. Spray rises and fins in the wind. Salt gathers on your lips, and you remember the fine stone dust clinging to your fingers earlier. The island coats you again, salt instead of tough, like it's signing its name across your skin. As you pass another moai, the torchlight makes the eye sockets deepen, then soften. It is unsettling in the gentlest way, like realizing the room is larger than you thought. You fight the urge to invent expressions, to decide what the face means. The stillness teaches restraint. These are not props for your imagination. They are anchors for memory, communal, geographic, ancestral, held in stone so the island can keep looking at itself without forgetting. The wind threads through grass growing thin between rocks. A hand from one of the locals gestures, first toward the horizon, then inland slopes, connecting sea, land, and the line of figures without a word. You understand anyway. On a small island, direction matters, and so does relationship. The moai stand not to impress you, but to hold a vow between people and place, between the living and those remembered. And because you are human, a flicker of irreverent modern thought slides in. You imagine hauling one of these immense presences across uneven ground without machines, and your muscles protest on behalf of whoever did it. You give yourself a quiet, cheeky reality check. Yes, you would be useless, and no, you wouldn't last long without snacks and rest. Humility arrives in the shape of gratitude. The torches continue along the line of Ahu, and you follow, letting the silhouettes guide you like slow, dark lighthouses. The night deepens, the wind keeps combing the grass, the sea keeps breathing, and you carry the quarry's lesson into your bones. Reverence is not a mood you perform, it is a pace you choose again and again in places that deserve your quiet.
You leave the line of Moai behind you without turning it into a dramatic goodbye, because the island has been training you out of theatrics all night. Torches guide you along a lower track where grass thins and the ground breaks into dark, warm stone. The sea stays close enough to keep your lungs salted, but the wind shifts just slightly, and you catch a different scent underneath it. Smoke that isn't only torch resin, something rounder, warmer, carrying the promise of food. Your body responds before your mind does. Shoulders drop another millimeter. Your hands, still faintly remembering quarry dust, flex as if they've been holding tension for hours. It's almost comical how quickly you become a simple creature when hunger shows up. A dignified adult 1 second, a quietly desperate animal the next. You probably won't survive this either, not your composure at least, because warmth and nourishment are very persuasive arguments. Ahead, torchlight gathers around a shallow hollow in the ground. At first you think it's just another work circle, another station of careful hands and deliberate tools. Then you see the steam, thin, steady threads rising into the night, and you recognize the particular magic of heat coming from earth instead of flame. The ground itself seems to exhale. A low pit has been prepared, lined with stones that hold heat like a secret. Leaves, broad, green, glossy, and torchlight, are layered over the stones, and the edges are tucked down with the same patience you watched in the quarry. Everything is arranged with calm competence, a few baskets set aside, a flat rock cleared like a serving place, water nearby, and extra torches positioned so their light grazes the scene without blinding it. You are guided closer with small gestures. No one rushes you. No one treats your hunger as entertainment. A place opens at the edge of the warmth where you can sit without being in the way, knees tucked in, palms held out toward the heat. The stones radiate a slow, deep warmth that doesn't sting the skin like fire. It climbs into you gradually, the way relief does when it's finally safe. The leaves are lifted carefully, and steam rises in a soft rush, fragrant and sweet with earth. It fogs the air for a moment, and torchlight turns it into a glowing veil. Underneath, food rests in layers, root vegetables softened by hours of steady heat, fish or meat wrapped to keep its juices, maybe greens tucked in to drink up flavor. Everything cooked by patience instead of panic. The island has one theme tonight, and it commits to it. You watch hands move in a practiced sequence. Lift, peel back, let the steam escape. Check doneness with a gentle press. Pull items out and set them aside so they can rest. Resting, you're learning, is not laziness here. It's respect for the process. Food is treated like the stone, something you don't bully into readiness. A piece of something warm is placed into your hands, carefully, as if they remember you're new to this rhythm. It might be sweet potato, its flesh soft and golden, smelling faintly of smoke and leaf. It might be taro, starchy and comforting,
the kind of food that feels like it was invented specifically for tired people. Whatever it is hot enough to force you into the present. You shift it between your palms, blow gently, and suddenly your whole mind has one job: be here, be simple, be grateful. You eat slowly because the heat makes impatience pointless. The first bite is almost offensively soothing. Your muscles loosen as if they've been waiting for this permission all day. Salt from the air, warmth from the ground, softness from the food. Your nervous system makes a quiet little note that says, "This is what safety feels like." Around you, others eat with the same unhurried focus. There is no performative gratitude, no big gestures. The calm is communal, like the tide. It doesn't ask who deserves it, it simply returns. Torches crackle, steam thins. The sea continues its steady breathing beyond the rocks, like a lullaby that never tires. You notice small details the way you notice stars when your eyes finally accept the dark. Leaves used for wrapping are folded neatly and set aside instead of tossed. The serving area stays tidy, not because mess is shameful, but because cleanliness keeps the night peaceful. Someone pours water into a simple cup or vessel, and the sound is soft and clean, like rain choosing one small place to land. Another person brushes ash from a stone with the same care you used to brush dust off a tool handle. Everything is continuity: stone, fire, leaf, hand. You look down at your fingers and see the fine residue of the island still on you. Earlier, pale quarry dust. Now, a faint sheen from warm food and steam. Your hands are becoming part of the night's story, lightly marked by what you've touched. It feels more honest than the usual marks you carry: notifications, deadlines, the invisible bruise of rushing. The warmth spreads deeper. Your breath slows again, syncing with the steady pace around the pit. You realize how different this kind of sharing is from the loud, fast sharing you're used to, where meals are squeezed between tasks and you eat like the world might steal your plate. Here, the world is not stealing. The world is feeding. The island's generosity is not flashy. It is structured, practiced, and quiet. And because you're still you, a faint thought tries to sneak in about whether you're taking too much space, about whether you should repay this somehow, about whether your gratitude is visible enough to count. The thought dissolves under the simplest truth: you were included, you were given warmth, you were fed. Sometimes that is the entire lesson, and your job is not to complicate it. When you finish, you hold your hands over the heat one last time, letting the warmth soak into your palms like a slow promise. The torches sway, the leaves settle back over the stones to keep their heat for later. The sea keeps breathing in the dark, and you sit there, full and softened, realizing you've been carved a little too, your edges blunted, your hurry scraped away by earth heat and shared calm. Warmth from the earth still lingers in your palms as you follow the torches back toward the shoreline circle, as if the island has stamped you with a quiet seal. Fed, softened, permitted to slow down. The path is familiar now: dark rock, pale seams, grass that whispers when the wind combs through it, and your feet place themselves with less complaint. Your body has stopped negotiating. It has accepted the rules. Pay attention, move gently, breathe like the sea. The carving songs reach you before the light does. Their low, repeating rhythm rolls out over the rocks in steady waves, not trying to impress the night, just holding it in place. Torchlight gathers ahead, the same amber pool you first approached, and the ocean breathes behind it, constant and therefore reassuring. When you step into the edge of the circle, you smell soot. It lives in the air as a soft, smoky sweetness mixed with resin and salt. Smoke drifts between torches, and the light turns it velvety. Hands are already at work. A block of volcanic stone rests on a stable bed of smaller rocks so it won't shift. Tools lie nearby in calm order: a heavier pick, chisels, a scraper, brushes for dust. The stone's surface is powdered pale with tuff, and every movement leaves a faint trail in it, like writing that disappears as soon as it's read. You settle where someone subtly makes space, knees tucked, shoulders loose. Heat from the nearest torch warms one side of your face, while the wind cools the other. Your eyelids begin their slow negotiations, but the rhythm keeps you present. The work is quieter than you expected, not silent. There's the song, the sea, the crackle of flame, but it avoids unnecessary noise. Each strike is measured. Tap, pause, tap, pause. The pauses aren't hesitation, they're listening. After each touch of tool to stone, hands wait for the material to answer, through sound, through resistance, through the way dust falls. Clean ribbons in one spot, reluctant grit in another. Soot marks some hands, smudged into knuckle creases. A few cheeks carry faint streaks, accidental shadows that make everyone look more like part of the firelight than separate from it. Someone adjusts a wick, the flame flares for a heartbeat, then calms again. Fine stone dust lifts with each careful scrape and catches torchlight in tiny drifts. You watch it float, slow and patient, and your chest softens as if it has finally been given permission to match that pace. A tool is placed near you, not pushed into your hand, just offered in proximity. It's a small scraper with a smooth handle, and you recognize the quiet comfort of it. Maybe the same handle you helped soften earlier, now returned to duty. Your nervous system thinks being watched means being judged. Stone is uninterested in your inner theatrics. You pick up the scraper and let its weight settle into your palm. Someone angles a torch so the light grazes the stone face where you're meant to work. The angle reveals a shallow guideline. Your role is simple: smooth a skull patch so it's ready for the next step. Useful, modest, real. You draw the scraper along the stone with gentle pressure. The sound is a whisper. Pale dust gathers at the edge and you pause, because everyone pauses, and brush it away with your fingertips. Dust coats your skin cool and fine, mixing with the leftover warmth in your hands from the earth oven. You repeat: scrape, pause, brush, scrape, pause, brush. The song holds steady behind you, and your breathing begins to match it. Your thoughts, usually loud and sprinting, start moving in smaller steps, as if they've learned the ground is uneven and they don't want to fall. In the center of the circle, another set of hands deepens a line with careful taps that never turn into anger. The stone gives slowly, and the form emerges through small, repeated efforts that add up while nobody is keeping score. You make tiny mistakes, pressing a little too hard, scraping at the wrong angle, and the stone tells you immediately, not cruelly, just honestly. The dust changes, the sound shifts. You adjust, you try again. As minutes stretch, your small patch becomes smoother, not perfect, just calmer, less jagged, more ready. You brush away the last of the dust and set the scraper down where it belongs. Your fingertips are pale with powder. Your sleeve carries a faint soot kiss where you leaned too close to a torch. You look at your hands and feel a sleepy satisfaction. You've been marked by something steadier than stress. The carving songs keep circling, the torches keep flickering, and the sea keeps breathing behind everything like a giant patient chest. You sit in the glow and let the rhythm hold you, soot and stone dust settling into a simple truth you don't have to argue with. You are here, you are safe, and the night is shaping you just as gently as you shaped the stone.
You remain in the torch circle long enough for the rhythm to sink deeper than thought. The stone dust on your fingertips dries into a pale film, and the soot smudge on your sleeve becomes a quiet badge of belonging. Not impressive, just real. The carving continues without needing you to stare at it, because the work is steady enough to exist whether you're watching or not. Eventually, the circle loosens, not like an ending, but like a tide easing back from shore. A torch is lifted, another is checked. The group shifts their attention away from the stone face and toward what happens before carving ever becomes a torch-lit song, moving the stone in the first place. Your body, softened by food and rhythm, follows without argument. Your mind tries to predict complexity because modern life trained it to expect every task to be a crisis in disguise. The island, as always, declines the drama. You walk a short distance to a flatter stretch of ground where timber rests in dark stacks, smooth logs, shorter beams, and shaped wedges laid out with deliberate spacing. Fiber ropes are coiled nearby, thick and pale in the torchlight, their braided strands catching highlights like slow waves frozen mid-motion. The smell here is different, less smoke and sea, more wood and fiber, with that faint resin sweetness still threaded through. There is no single machine. There is an arrangement of simple things, rope, wood, stone, bodies, and a method that makes them behave like something greater than the sum of parts. It's the kind of ingenuity that doesn't announce itself. It just works. You watch hands test a rope's thickness by running it through their fingers, feeling for weak spots the way you felt for that snag on the tool handle earlier. The same discipline lives here. Notice small flaws early, and you avoid big pain later. A knot is tied, not with flourish, but with calm certainty. Tightened, checked, tightened again. The rope doesn't squeak or protest. It settles into its own logic. Nearby, a timber beam is positioned on the ground as a lever base, one end braced against a stone that won't move. Smaller wedges are placed under a second beam, creating a controlled rise. Nothing is lifted in one heroic moment. Everything is persuaded upward in increments. The island seems to prefer persuasion as a general philosophy. You begin to understand the workflow through observation because no one narrates it for you like a tutorial video. Torches are placed so shadows reveal alignment. Bodies stand where they can see each other's hands and posture in peripheral vision. Space is cleared around the working zone so feet won't tangle. The setup alone feels like a form of care, an environment designed to keep humans from turning frantic. A large stone rests nearby, not as enormous as a moai, but heavy enough to make your spine remember it has feelings. Its surface is rough, pale in places where it has been freshly worked, darker where dust and handling have smoothed it. You look at it and briefly imagine trying to move it alone, which is a useful moment of humility. Your arms, fed and warm, still do not volunteer. They remain quietly realistic.
The method begins with small shifts. A rope is looped around the stone's midsection, padding placed beneath so the fiber won't bite into edges. The rope is pulled taut, not yanked. A lever is set, and weight is applied gradually. The stone responds with a reluctant scrape, stone on stone, then settles again as if deciding whether it respects this request. Pressure eases. The small wedge slips in under the edge that lifted, no more than a finger's height. Then the lever works again. Pressure, scrape, pause. Pressure, scrape, pause. Every pause is a check. Is the rope seated correctly? Is the beam stable? Are feet placed safely? Is anyone's posture starting to strain? The choreography is quiet, precise, communal. You notice how the group avoids sudden movements. When tension builds in the rope, it is held steady rather than snapped. When the stone shifts, hands do not flinch into panic. They adjust their stance, widen their balance, and let the motion complete. The island's way of working assumes that calm is not a personality trait, it's a technique. You were given a role, not a spotlight role, thankfully, because you're still wearing stone dust like it's fashionable and you don't need to become the night's comedy. You're positioned at a safer angle with a smaller wedge and instructed through gesture alone. Be ready to slide it in when the lift happens. Your job is timing, not strength. It is, unexpectedly, a relief. The lever rises again under controlled weight. The stone lifts a fraction, and you feel the moment in your chest as if the whole group inhales together. You slide the wedge in smoothly, fingers quick but not frantic, then pull your hand back before gravity remembers its priorities. The stone settles onto the wedge with a mudded thud, secure, supported. Your heart, slightly dramatic by default, calms when nothing goes wrong. The island rewards that calm with quiet success. The sequence repeats. Each time the stone advances a little, either rotating or shifting along a prepared path, timber rollers placed beneath, then replaced one by one as the weight moves forward. The rollers make the motion smoother, almost gentle, transforming raw mass into something that can travel without violence. You watch hands lift a roller from behind the stone and carry it forward to place again in front, recycling effort like a steady tide. The whole process is labor, yes, but it isn't suffering. It's organized. It is shared. No one tries to win. No one forces their strength past their limits to prove they're worthy. You see bodies working with the intelligence of conserving energy for tomorrow, and you realize how rare that is in the life you came from, where people sprint until they collapse and then call it dedication. Torches continue to flicker, and the rope fibers shine in thin lines. The sea's sound threads behind everything, steady as breathing. Your palms, still faintly warm from earlier, now carry a different warmth. The satisfaction of being part of a system that protects its people while achieving something difficult. You understand the island's ingenious workflow not as a trick, but as a mindset, slow, coordinated, attentive, respectful of materials and of bodies. When the stone reaches its intended resting place, secure on a prepared base, tension is released carefully. Knots are loosened, ropes are coiled again with the same neat patience. Timber is stacked, wedges are gathered. Nothing is left scattered to become tomorrow's hazard. The work ends the way it began, not with triumph, but with quiet maintenance. You look down at your hands, dust, faint soot, a trace of fiber, and you feel the night's theme tighten into one calm sentence inside you. On Rapa Nui, even the heaviest things move when you stop trying to do them alone.
You look down at your hands, dust, faint soot, a trace of fiber, and the night's theme tightens into something simple inside you. The ropes are coiled, wedges gathered, timber restacked. Nothing is left scattered to become tomorrow's injury. Torches lead you back toward the shoreline circle. The sea is close again, loud enough to steady you, and the salt in the air makes every inhale feel cleaner. Torchlight falls in warm patches on black rock, then breaks apart into darkness. You step carefully, because the island has already made its point about rushing. At the carving station, the stone waits in half-light, supported on smaller rocks so it will not shift. Tools return to their tidy order, and hands return to their slow agreement. Tap, pause, brush. Tap, pause, brush. What matters most now is the light. A torch near the working face needs tending. The wick has grown long, resin has built a glossy ridge, and the flame stays polite only because the wind has been polite. You are guided to it with a simple gesture. Keep this flame calm so the work can stay calm. You crouch beside the base. Heat presses softly at your fingertips. Smoke rises in a thin ribbon. You trim the wick, nudge the resin, and wait a beat to see how the flame answers. Adjust, pause, check. Adjust, pause, check. Your breathing matches the pattern. For a while, everything holds. Then the wind turns. The flame bends hard to one side, nearly horizontal for a breath. Smoke drops low and slides into the circle instead of rising away. Shadows jump across the stone face, and the surface the carvers were reading becomes a flickering puzzle. Your eyes sting, your throat tightens. You keep your breathing quiet, because coughing loudly in a torch circle would be an impressively modern way to ruin the calm. You reach to tilt the torch slightly into the wind, just a small correction. Your fingers press the base rock. A support stone, loosened by foot traffic, shifts. The torch tips a fraction. The wick gulps air. The flame flares, and a tiny ember breaks free, spiraling down like a brief red insect. It lands near a coil of fiber rope. Near, not on, but close enough to tighten your stomach. A hand moves fast with a flat piece of wood, nudging the rope farther away. Another steadies the torch and presses the base back into place. The ember dies against cool rock. The flame settles again, still leaning, but no longer flaring. You exhale and realize you were holding your breath like you could keep the night from noticing you. The danger passes, but the disruption stays. Smoke continues to drift low, and the light refuses to sit still. The carving hands resume their measured taps, yet you hear the difference when shadow jumps at the wrong moment, a chisel touch that sounds too sharp, dust falling in a reluctant sprinkle instead of a soft puff. A tool hovers mid-air, waiting for the surface to stop pretending it's moving. The song keeps its slow loop, stubbornly soothing, but bodies tighten around it in small ways, an extra pause, a repositioned knee, a steadier stance. The calm system you admired has been nudged off balance by wind, the one thing nobody negotiates with. Embarrassment warms your cheeks, private and immediate. You replay the moment you assumed the base would hold. It was so small. It always is. So you do the only smart thing you've learned here. You slow down. You stop making quick fixes and start reading the scene. You watch how the wind channels between rock outcrops and strikes the torch at a predictable angle. You notice where smoke pools low and where it clears fastest.
You see the loosened support stone and the exact spot where a wedge will lock it. You let your eyes settle on one anchor point, then build from there. A flat stone is wedged under the base, firming the seat. The torch is lowered a touch, so the flame is less exposed. Another torch is shifted a step to the side, creating steadier crosslight that softens the worst shadow jumps. None of it is frantic. It is careful recalibration. The flame still leans, but it leans consistently now. Smoke still drifts, but it does not flood the circle in one heavy wave. The stone face becomes readable again, not perfectly, but enough. The tapping resumes with longer pauses, more listening, more restraint. Even so, the rhythm is not fully back. You can feel it, timing slightly off, hands cautious, everyone waiting for the circle to find its balance before the mistake grows teeth. Torches crackle. The sea keeps breathing behind you. The wind keeps its sideways pressure. And you sit in the shifting light, soot on your sleeve and salt on your lips, understanding that the gentlest problems are often the most dangerous, because they arrive softly and ask whether you will stay rushed.
You sit in the sideways pressure of the wind and feel your mind reach for its favorite hobby, blame. It wants to pin the whole wobble of the night on one small mistake, as if guilt is a lever that can lift time back into place. It wants you to replay the ember's brief spiral, the loosened stone, the flare, the tightness in your throat, until you shrink yourself to the size of a problem. The island, unimpressed, offers a quieter option: repair. Hands keep moving with the same unhurried competence you saw at the quarry and the rope station. No one snaps into alarm, no one performs outrage. The only thing that changes is the quality of attention: sharper, steadier, more collective. The carving song continues, low and looping, as if it refuses to let the circle drift into chaos just because the wind has decided to edit the lighting. You watch how they recover, and you let your body copy them. First comes the light, not more light, better light. Torches are not decorations, they are tools, and tools get tuned. A torch closest to the wind is lowered slightly, so the flame sits nearer its own heat and is less exposed. Another is moved back a step, trading brightness for stability. A third is angled so its beam grazes the stone face and reveals texture without throwing frantic shadows. You find yourself holding a flat stone near a torch base, feeling for the moment it stops wobbling and starts belonging again. You slide it in like a wedge, the same slow-fingered motion you practiced under the levered stone earlier. The base locks, the flame steadies into a consistent lean, smoke thins and lifts in a cleaner ribbon. Then comes the air. Wind cannot be negotiated with, but it can be guided. A low wall of rocks is built, nothing heroic, just enough to break the worst gusts. Stones are chosen for flatness and stacked with the same fitted logic you noticed on the Ahu. Dark blocks sitting shoulder to shoulder until the wind is forced to step around instead of barging straight through the circle. A small timber baffle is set at an angle to encourage smoke upward, and suddenly everyone can breathe again without wincing. Your eyes stop stinging, your throat unclenches. You give yourself the mildest internal sarcasm. Yes, you almost turned a gust of wind into a personal identity crisis. Very modern of you. The stone face becomes readable again. Not perfectly, torchlight never promises perfection, but consistently.
Shadows settle into slower movements, and the carving hands respond by returning to their natural tempo. Tap, pause. Tap, pause. Brush, breathe. The song holds its low curve, and your breathing begins to match it again, like tidewater finding its familiar shelf. You do what you can without stepping into the center. You take on the tasks that keep the circle calm, feeding resin carefully, trimming a wick before it grows moody, brushing away dust that could blur the work, shifting a torch by a handspan when its beam starts to jump. Each action is small, which is the point. The island's strategy seems to be simple: make the problem smaller than panic can use. The most surprising part is what does not happen. No blame is poured into the air. No one points at you or at the shifted stone or at the ember's lazy little arc. The response is communal and practical. If something wobbles, steady it. If smoke pools, redirect it. If rhythm slips, slow down until it returns. Relief moves through you, quiet and physical, as if your ribs have been carrying a weight you didn't know how to name. The song helps. It never speeds up to catch up. It never turns sharp to scold the wind. It stays gentle, stubbornly repetitive, like the ocean breathing behind you. And slowly, your internal tempo follows. The part of you that usually rushes to fix everything in one frantic burst learns a different sequence. Adjust, wait, check, repeat. Torches crackle softly, steadier now. Smoke rises in thin threads that drift away instead of flooding the circle. Dust lifts in pale motes that float rather than sting. The work resumes, and you can feel the moment the circle collectively trusts itself again. When hands stop hovering mid-air, when knees settle, when the tapping becomes confident without becoming loud. You glance toward the dark coastline where the moai keep their inland gaze, patient as ever. You remember the earth heat earlier, how the food cooked without hurry, how leaves were folded neatly back over stone. The same ethic lives here. When something goes wrong, you don't punish the moment, you return it to order. Eventually, the disruption becomes a memory instead of a threat. The torch that nearly tipped now burns with steady humility, its flame leaning like a bow rather than a panic. You sit with soot on your sleeve and salt on your lips, and the night feels whole again, not because nothing happened, but because what did happen was met with patience. You probably still won't survive this in the way your daytime self expects, because you were watching rhythm rebuilt without blame, and some tired, stubborn part of you starts believing you could learn to do the same. The circle settles back into itself the way a tide returns to its familiar line on rock. No drama, just steadiness. Torches burn with calmer posture. Smoke rises in thinner threads, and the stone face is readable again. The carving songs stay low, looping, patient, as if they never noticed the disruption at all. That stubborn gentleness leaves you feeling oddly clean inside, as if blame has been rinsed off you. After a while, the work slows naturally, not because anyone declares it finished, but because bodies know when to stop pressing. Tools are set down in quiet order. Dust is brushed away. Torches are tended one more time so they won't become tomorrow's hazard. The group shifts, and you sense an invitation to move, not away from the craft, but toward balance. You follow a few figures down a narrow track toward the water. The route is familiar now. Black rock underfoot, salt air in your lungs, wind that tests the torch flames and then relaxes again. You don't need to stare at your feet as much. Your body has learned the island's language, the slightly slick stones near the tide line, the rougher edges higher up, the places where grass holds a bit of moisture and makes the ground softer. You walk as if you belong to the night rather than traveling through it. At the shoreline, the sound changes. The ocean becomes louder, closer, more physical. Waves fold in and break against rock with a steady, breathing insistence. Spray lifts and cools your face, and your skin responds instantly, alive, awake, rinsed. A shallow pool sits between rocks, filled by the tide and calmed by shelter. Torchlight flickers across its surface and makes it look like liquid amber for a moment. Then the wind shifts and it turns dark again. The locals kneel near the pool, and you mirror them, not out of obedience, but because your knees already understand the relief of lowering yourself to the earth. Your hands still carry the night's evidence, fine dust from stone, faint resin, soot smudged into creases. You dip your fingers into the pool, and the water is colder than you expect. Cold in a clean way, not cruel. It tightens your skin, wakes your fingertips, and pulls the dust away in pale clouds that drift and dissolve. You wash slowly, because rushing makes the cold bite harder. You rub thumb against palm, palm against fingers, fingertips against nail edges. Stone dust lifts away, and the water takes it without complaint. You splash your wrists, and the cold runs up your arms like a message. You are here. You are not inside your day anymore. The sea's salt air mixes with the torch smoke behind you. It's a strange combination, clean and smoky, sharp and sweet, but it suits the island. Everything here is layered. Fire and water, stone and leaf, labor and rest, reverence and practicality. Your mind tries to separate things into categories because that's its habit, but your body knows better. It just receives. You rinse your hands again and hold them up to the wind. The breeze dries your skin quickly, leaving a faint salt sheen. Torches behind you crackle softly, and the light makes your wet fingers shine. You watch water drip back into the pool in slow beads, and your eyelids grow heavier, as if your nervous system is finally convinced that nothing needs you urgently. A seabird calls somewhere out over the dark water, one sharp sound that stretches into the night. It feels like punctuation in a long, quiet paragraph. You breathe in and out and let the sea's rhythm take over. Inhale as the wave gathers. Exhale as it breaks and withdraws. You borrow the ocean's pace the way you borrowed the carving songs earlier. Your attention drifts outward. You notice how the stars look different from the shore, brighter, more stable, because the horizon is wide and your eyes can rest on distance without being blocked by buildings, screens, or the constant demand to focus on something small and urgent. You pick a constellation and let it anchor you. The locals don't point or instruct. They simply share the same sky in the same silence, and that shared quiet feels like belonging. Somewhere behind you, a torch is adjusted, and the flame flares briefly, then settles. The small sound of it, resin feeding flame, feels comforting now instead of alarming. You remember the ember that fell earlier and how quickly it was handled, how blame never entered the air. That memory, too, is rinsed by the sea. It becomes a lesson rather than a bruise. Your hands, now clean, rest on your knees. You feel the coolness on your skin, the salt in the air, the steady pressure of wind against your cheeks. The island is doing what it does best, regulating you with simple physical truths: cold water, warm torchlight, a wave that never forgets how to return. When you finally stand, your body feels lighter, as if the dust was never only on your hands. You follow the torches back up from the tide line, leaving the pool behind like a small mirror you don't need anymore. The sea keeps breathing in the dark, and you carry its hush with you, cooling your hands, clearing your mind, making room for the next gentle step.
You climb from the tide line with clean hands and a calmer face, and the torchlight feels different now, less like a spotlight and more like a small hearth you carry through the dark. Your sleeve still holds a faint soot kiss from earlier, and your fingertips still remember the cold shock of seawater. As the path angles away from the loudest surf, the ocean becomes a broad, steady presence, like a giant breathing in the next room. The locals with you do not announce where you're headed. They do not need to. On an island, direction is a relationship you build by paying attention. You match their pace and begin noticing cues that were invisible when you first arrived. The way the wind presses against one cheek, the way salt smell thickens and thins, the way torch flames lean and recover as if they have their own quiet opinions. You pass a low rise where grass grows thicker and the wind changes texture. It becomes less sharp, more buffered, as if the land has stepped between you and the sea. Ocean wind tastes bright and wet. Inland wind tastes drier, warmer, threaded with earth and stone. Your face becomes a compass you never requested, and your body uses it anyway. You lift your eyes. The stars sharpen as your sight adjusts, and the sky looks absurdly full. One bright point sits steady above the horizon. The locals glance at it, not staring, just checking, and you realize they carry the sky the way you carry an address, quietly, constantly. You choose that star too, keeping it in the corner of your vision as the land rolls under your feet. The coastline curves and the star shifts relative to the slope. Instead of feeling lost, you feel oriented, because you are watching change happen on purpose. The island turns you, and you let it. You remember the moai standing inland facing, patient as ever, and you feel that same inward steadiness settle into your posture. You reach a place where the ground drops toward the rocks and the sea grows louder again. Torches are kept low, angled down so the light grazes the path. Below, foam writes pale lines that appear and vanish, curving around hidden rock and dissolving in the dark. In that brief handwriting, the ocean shows you where it breaks hard and where it slides, where danger sits and where a calmer channel opens. You begin to notice the sets, stronger surges clustered together, then a softer one, then a pause long enough to hear stones settling. The pattern repeats. The locals read it the way you recognize a familiar song, and you understand that navigation here is not about controlling space, it is about accepting that space is already speaking. A gust brushes the torches, and every flame leans in the same direction. It is an instant arrow. When the wind presses consistently against your cheek, you know where the sea is. When it swirls and arrives from behind your ear, you know you've turned around an outcrop or stepped into shelter. You begin to feel the land's geometry in your stance, the way you felt the quarry's grain in your fingertips. Smoke becomes another teacher. When it rises straight, the air is calm. When it drifts low and heavy, a shift is coming. You remember the flare, the ember's quick spiral, and how the rope was moved without panic. You understand now why the circle treated smoke as a serious signal. It tells you what the air will do before the air decides to announce itself.
You follow a line of stones that looks random until you realize it isn't. The stones mark a subtle corridor through uneven ground, better footing, fewer slick patches, less risk of a sudden, humiliating stumble. You step where they suggest, and your body relaxes when it doesn't have to negotiate every surface. Stars above, surf below, wind at your cheek, stone underfoot. Each cue overlaps. Together, they become a lullaby for orientation. You are not finding your way in any heroic sense. You are being guided by steady things that do not care whether you feel impressive. At a brief stop, you glance back. In the distance, torchlight from the carving circle flickers like a small, warm constellation on the ground. The song is too faint to hear, but your breathing still remembers its loop. You realize the island has been giving you multiple anchors all night, and it has been doing it without asking for praise. You turn forward again, and your steps settle into quieter confidence, not the confidence of someone who knows everything, but the confidence of someone who can stay calm enough to notice. You keep the bright star in a gentle corner of your vision. You listen for the sea's breathing. You feel the wind's pressure. And as you move through the night, you understand the island's deeper lesson about direction. When you stop fighting the night, it starts showing you where you already are. When you stop fighting the night, it shows you where you are, and, with quiet accuracy, what you forgot to notice. You carry that lesson back toward the torch circle, following the stone-marked corridor and the gentle lean of flame, letting the sea breath stay in your lungs like a slow metronome. The star you used as an anchor fades behind torchlight, and the sky becomes a softer canopy over human hands again. The carving station receives you the way it did at the beginning, without demands. The song loops low and steady. Tap, pause, scrape, pause, brush away dust. Your hands, rinsed by seawater, feel clean enough to touch stone without dragging half the quarry with you. Your sleeve still carries a faint soot kiss, and the torch smoke makes it smell like you've been living inside a hearth rather than inside a deadline. A place opens at the edge of the light. You settle there, knees tucked, and let your breathing drop into the song's pace. Shadows behave. Smoke rises in thinner threads. Everything is steady enough to make you drowsy in the most flattering way, like your nervous system is finally being handled by someone competent. Work continues for a while in that soft groove. Dust lifts in pale motes and settles again. Tools sit in their calm order beside the stone. The heavier pick, the chisels, the brushes, the honing stone, coils of fiber cord. The arrangement is so familiar now that your eyes read it without effort. Then the rhythm catches. At first, it's almost nothing, just a hand hovering a beat too long over the tool line. Fingers slide along handles as if rereading a sentence. Tapping pauses for half a breath. Torches are angled down, their light skimming wood, stone, and cord. The song doesn't stop, but it lowers, as though it's giving the circle room to think. There is an empty space where a tool should be. Not a dramatic emptiness, a small gap, the kind that feels louder than a shout when you're working in darkness and every object has a purpose. The tool missing is the fine one, the one used for controlled depth and delicate lines, the one that keeps detail from turning into damage. Without it, the hands that know this craft will not simply make do. That's how stone gets forced, edges crumble, and mistakes become permanent. Your chest tightens anyway, because you are very human and your brain loves to treat small gaps like personal catastrophes. You glance down at your own hands, as if the missing tool could have magically fused to your fingers. It hasn't. Your palms are clean. Your conscience is trying to be less tidy. No one flares into blame. The response is immediate, quiet, and practical. A palm sweeps the ground near the tool line, feeling through dust for a handle half buried. Fingers check under a cloth, under a leaf wrap set aside earlier. A basket is lifted, inspected, placed back with care. A flat stone is shifted, and the dust beneath it is red like fresh sand for signs of movement. You remember the torch base that shifted when you assumed its support would hold. You remember the ember's brief spiral and how quickly it was handled. Now you imagine the missing tool rolling once, just once, into shadow. A handle can slip into grass. A tool can slide into the crease between rocks where the island collects what tired hands drop. Torches are repositioned to widen the pool of light. Shadows retreat to a thinner edge. The sea keeps breathing behind you, steady and indifferent, while the circle's attention tightens into something you can almost feel in the air. The calm deepens, not relaxed calm, but focused calm, the kind that treats urgency as a reason to slow down rather than speed up. Checks expand outward in a disciplined pattern. The ground around the stone is swept in overlapping arcs. The torch bases are inspected, especially the one that nearly tipped earlier. A few people walk a slow perimeter, eyes low, scanning the places where smoke drifted and where feet shifted. Someone glanced toward the timber and rope station nearby, because habits can carry a tool farther than intention. A hand might have set it down there without thinking, then returned to the circle empty-handed. You notice how the darkness changes character. It remains soothing, but it also has folds, pockets where an object can vanish without traveling far. Above, the stars hold steady, patient as ever. Below, the surf repeats its long phrases against rock. Here at ground level, between flame and stone, the night is full of hiding places. Your role becomes clear without anyone assigning it. You are extra eyes and extra hands, and you have learned enough tonight to help without making noise. You rise carefully, making sure your feet don't kick dust into the light. You let your gaze move the island's way, low, slow, pattern-seeking. You scan for disturbances, fresh scuffs in dust, a pale line where something dragged, a glint that isn't stone. Your clean fingers flex, ready to feel along crevices where sight fails. The song continues, softer now, like a heartbeat refusing to become frantic. Torches crackle, smoke lifts in thin threads, and in that calm, concentrated hush, the real problem arrives fully in your bones. Something essential is missing in the dark, and the island will only give it back if you search the way it teaches, slowly, gently, and together. You stand, you breathe once, and you let the island teach you how to look. Not the frantic, modern looking that is basically panic wearing shoes, but the slow kind. Attention that moves like a tide and trusts that what is missing hasn't vanished into another universe. A tool doesn't teleport. It slips, it rolls, it settles. It hides in the exact places tired hands and uneven rock collaborate to create. You start where the absence is loudest, the gap in the tool line beside the stone. Torchlight is angled low, skimming the ground so every pebble throws a small shadow. That grazing light turns dust into topography. Pale, tough powder shows toe prints clearly, soft crescents where knees pressed, faint drag marks where something cylindrical might have nudged through grit. You crouch and let your eyes travel in slow arcs, because speed makes you miss what the ground is already saying. The song continues behind you, quieter now, looping like a heartbeat that refuses to become a siren. The sea breathes beyond the rocks. Between those two steady sounds, you listen for smaller signals. A scuff that looks fresh, a patch of dust brushed too clean, a sprinkle of ash that landed after the torch flare and hasn't been disturbed since. You remember the wind turning, the torch base shifting, the ember spiraling down, the rope being nudged away. Those movements pulled bodies outward for a moment, made feet step where they hadn't been stepping, made hands set things down without noticing. If the fine tool was placed on the ground for one breath, just one, it could have rolled toward the windbreak stones, toward the edge of the circle, toward any crevice that likes to collect quiet mistakes. So you follow pressure marks first. On the windward side, the dust shows a shallow sweep, footsteps angled out and back in, careful but quick. Near them, the powder is smudged into a thin gray sheen, as if something smooth passed over it. You tilt your head, let the torch skim again, and the sheen becomes a line, barely visible, running a handspan toward a cluster of darker rocks. You don't pounce, you simply keep reading. Ash is scattered there in tiny freckles, unevenly, heavier on the side that faced the flare, lighter where a body blocked it. The pattern tells you where people stood when the torch flared and what didn't happen afterward, because the ash still sits undisturbed, delicate as moth dust. If the tool slid through this patch, it would have drawn a track. You look, and you find one, a faint groove that interrupts the freckles, then disappears where the ground turns rough and the dust thins out. The island does its favorite thing right there. It hides the evidence in the exact place where a tired mind would stop trying. You bring your attention closer instead. You move with knees bent and shoulders loose so your feet don't stamp new noise onto the ground. You lower the torch a fraction and let the light skim into the seams between stones. The crevices are cool and slightly damp with sea air. Your fingers sweep gently along an edge, feeling for what isn't rock, wood grain, fiber binding, the smoothness of a handle worn by palms. At first, you meet only stone, then a tuft of dry grass wedged into a crack like forgotten hair. You pinch it and lift it away. Behind it, the crevice opens a little deeper, and you feel along it again, slow, careful, patient enough to stay accurate. Still nothing. Your brain tries to get dramatic, the way it does when you lose your keys and suddenly decide your entire personality is incapable of basic tasks. You ignore that impulse and widen your search the island's way. Not farther, but smarter. You check the places where objects naturally rest. Shallow bowls in rock where a tool could roll and stop. The edges of the low windbreak wall where stones meet stones and leave thin pockets. the soft strip of grass bordering the circle that loves to swallow anything smaller than pride. You brush dust with the side of your hand, not to erase, but to reveal. Clean strokes create contrast, and contrast creates clues. A few steps away, near the base of the windbreak, you notice a subtle mound of powder, as if something slid underneath and pushed dust into a small ridge. You angle the torch. The ridge throws a thin shadow. You slide your fingers under the lip of a flat rock that looks harmless, too harmless, the way hiding places always do. Your fingertips touch something smooth and slightly tacky, cooled resin, the kind used to secure bindings. You pause long enough to be sure you're not imagining comfort. Then you ease the object free. It is the fine tool. The handle is dusted pale, the binding darkened by resin, and in torchlight it catches a faint sheen like a quiet wink. It has been tucked under the flat rock at the base of the windbreak, caught there by the smallest slope and the gentlest roll. Exactly the kind of island logic that makes sense only after you stop rushing. You hold it steady in your palm and feel its familiar balance, the calm weight of something essential returning. Around you, attention shifts, not in a loud rush, but in a collective softening, like shoulders remembering they can drop. The song keeps looping. The sea keeps breathing. You remain quiet, because quiet is what this night respects, and because finding is only the first half of restoring. You hold the fine tool steady in your palm as if it might startle and vanish again, and it feels almost ridiculous how much relief can fit into something so small. The handle carries a thin film of pale dust, and the resin-dark binding is tacky in the way cooled resin always is, sticky with memory, not with mess. You brush it gently with your fingertips, not to make it pristine, but to make it ready. The circle's attention softens around you. No one lunges, no one snatches. A torch is angled slightly so the light falls on the tool and confirms it is real. Hands relax in small, visible ways. A knuckle unclenches, a shoulder drops, a knee shifts into comfort. The song doesn't swell into triumph. It continues at the same low cadence, as if it is teaching the most important principle of the night. Recovery should not be louder than the work. You bring the tool back to its place in the line, setting it down with the same care you watched in the quarry, edge protected, handle aligned, ready for the next hand. That simple act feels like restoring a missing stitch in fabric. Everything holds again. Work resumes without a formal restart. A hand lifts the fine tool and tests it lightly against the stone. Tap. Pause. Listening for the clean response. The stone answers with a soft, obedient sound, and the hand continues, carving depth with patience rather than force. Shadows now behave thanks to the windbreak and the adjusted torches. Smoke rises in thin threads that drift away like tired thoughts leaving the room. You sit at the edge of the circle, and the warmth from the torches returns to your cheeks in a calmer way. The sea keeps breathing behind you, steady as ever. You feel your own breath settle into that rhythm again, as if your body has finally accepted this is what safety sounds like. Steady work, steady flame, steady ocean. As minutes pass, the stone's surface changes almost imperceptibly. A line deepens, a curve smooths, a plane is refined until it catches light the way a quiet face catches dusk. Dust lifts with each careful scrape and is brushed away immediately, not to erase evidence, but to keep the work readable. The brush's soft motion becomes a kind of blessing. Dust removed, form revealed, patience rewarded. Your mind drifts into that hypnotic zone where time stops feeling like a threat. You notice small things that would normally be invisible. The way torchlight makes stone look warm even though it remains cool. The way soot darkens fingertips but never seems to make anyone care. The way the song's repetition doesn't bore you, it steadies you. The island is making a point over and over. Repetition is not stagnation. It's how you build something that lasts. A seabird calls again, distant and brief. The sound threads through the song and the sea and then dissolves. Someone adjusts a torch wick with a quick, practiced motion, and the flame steadies into a consistent lean. The wind presses, but it no longer interrupts. The low rock wall does its quiet job, turning gusts into softened breath. You think about the missing tool and how it was found, not by panic, not by blame, but by slow attention and the willingness to trust the ground's logic. The lesson lands gently, the way the island teaches all lessons. If something essential disappears, you don't thrash. You widen your awareness. You work together. You let the night tell you where it hid the answer. The carving continues and the circle's mood lightens, subtly in the only way this night permits. There's a softness in posture, an ease in hands, a slight loosening around the torches as if everyone can finally exhale fully. You feel it in yourself too. Your chest isn't braced anymore. Your jaw isn't clenched. Your thoughts aren't sprinting. You are simply present. Eventually, the work slows again, not from exhaustion, but from completion of a natural phase. Tools are laid down in their calm order. The stone face is brushed one last time, dust lifted away to reveal the day's progress under torchlight. The carved lines look gentler now, more deliberate, as if the stone itself has relaxed into its shape. You don't need to label it or evaluate it. You can just witness it. Torches are lowered slightly as if the circle is lowering its voice. The song stays soft, then thins, not stopping abruptly, but tapering like a wave that slides higher up the shore and then eases back. The sea keeps breathing, steady and patient, taking no credit for its own constancy. You sit there with soot on your sleeve and clean hands resting on your knees, and you feel the particular kind of relief that comes from a problem resolved without damage. The missing tool is back, the work continues, the circle holds. And somewhere inside you, something else has been recovered too. Something small, essential, and easily lost in the rush of your ordinary life. The belief that calm can be rebuilt and that you do not need to punish yourself to make things right.
You notice the ending before anyone declares it. It arrives the way dusk arrived, quietly, with temperature and light shifting by degrees until you realize the day has already stepped aside. Tools are wiped clean. Dust is brushed from stone with a tenderness that looks almost parental. The torch wicks are trimmed down to calmer flames, and the circle loosens, not from boredom, but from completion. The work has reached a point where forcing more would be rude. You rise with the others and feel the ground under you as a familiar language now, volcanic rock that demands respect, patches of grass that soften the step, the faint dampness near the sea that warns you not to get cocky. Your hands, once powdered and clumsy, hang at your sides with a quiet competence. They smell faintly of smoke and resin. They feel like they've been forgiven. A short trail of torches leads away from the carving station, and you follow it without needing to be pulled. The wind presses gently from the ocean, combing coolness through your hair. Behind you, the stone sits in half-light, lines deepened and surfaces smoothed, proof that patience can leave a mark without leaving damage. You carry that proof inside your ribs like a warm pebble. The path curves toward the Ahu again. You recognize the rise before you see it, the way you recognize a familiar rhythm before you remember its source. Torchlight gathers and spills across fitted stones, revealing seams so precise they still feel like a quiet dare to your rushed imagination. You slow down automatically. Your body has learned that reverence is a pace, not a speech. The moai appear as silhouettes first, tall, still, inland-facing. They stand where the wind can reach them and the sea can salt them and time can try, and they keep standing anyway. One torch swings slightly, and a band of face briefly glows, brow, nose, lips, then shadow returns, as if the figure is politely refusing to be turned into a spectacle for your tired eyes. You walk along the platform's length with the group's calm spacing around you. Below, the ocean breathes against rock, steady and unbothered. Foam writes pale lines that appear and vanish, repeating until repetition becomes comfort. You remember the quarry's listening hands, the rope and timber choreography, the earth heat that cooked dinner without rushing, the ember that tried to start a drama, and the missing fine tool hiding under a flat rock like it was practicing island humor. The memories arrive as gentle callbacks, tying your steps into one continuous thread. A short trail of torches leads away from the carving station, and you follow it without needing to be pulled. The wind presses gently from the ocean, combing coolness through your hair. Behind you, the stone sits in half-light, lines deepened and surfaces smoothed, proof that patience can leave a mark without leaving damage. You carry that proof inside your ribs like a warm pebble. The locals pause at a point where the platform meets a view inland. The moai's gaze makes sense here. It isn't aimed at the horizon for romance, it is aimed toward paths, shelters, and the places where people actually get tired.
It is a steady attention turned homeward. You feel something tender in your chest, the idea that protection can be quiet, that care can be made of stone and still be gentle. You take one last slow breath of the island. Salt, smoke, damp grass, the mineral scent of cooled rock. The air tastes like a long day being set down carefully. Your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches. If you arrived carrying noise inside your body, you leave carrying a kind of hush that fits you better. The torches begin to drift back down the path, and you follow for a while, then gradually fall a half step behind, letting distance open the way distance should, gently, without offense. The song from the carving circle is now only a memory, but your breathing keeps its rhythm. Tap, pause, scrape, pause, brush, breathe. The island has written that pattern into you, and you don't resist. Near the shoreline, the sea grows louder again, and the night feels wider. The torches thin out, and darkness fills the spaces between with softness rather than threat. The wind cools your clean hands, and your palms feel strangely light without dust, as if the rinsing was never only about stone. You glance once more toward the Moai line, their silhouettes still inland facing, and you let a quiet farewell settle in your throat without needing words. You do not promise to return dramatically. You do not ask the island to keep you forever. You simply thank it in the only way it seems to prefer, by carrying its calm away without breaking it, by walking carefully, by letting the night remain itself. You step forward, one slow foot after another, and the embers behind you continue their small, patient glow. When you finally turn fully toward the path ahead, you feel how steady you are. Not finished, not fixed, not magically transformed into a person who never spirals, just steadier, like a flame that leans with the wind and still keeps burning. Behind you, torches dim, embers cool, the ocean keeps breathing, and Rapa Nui continues in its own time, ready to welcome the next tired person who arrives certain they are too tough to be softened.
The path grows quieter with each step, and soon even the torches feel like they are whispering instead of burning. You let your arms hang loose, and you notice how easily they swing when they are not gripping anything. No tools, no ropes, no invisible worries that usually demand your knuckles. The ocean stays near, but it no longer feels loud. It feels faithful, repeating the same long breath until your own breathing forgets how to be sharp. You imagine the embers behind you cooling to a soft, harmless black, the way a thought cools when you stop feeding it. You imagine the stone face resting in darkness, lines held safely until morning, untouched by hurry. You imagine the Moai holding their inland gaze without effort, patient in the wind, steady in the salt, as if they are watching over the parts of you that always try to work too late. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from exhaustion alone, but from permission.
The island has shown you that nothing precious needs your panic to survive. It needs your attention, yes, but a gentle attention, slow enough to notice, soft enough to adjust, kind enough to rebuild rhythm when it slips. So you keep walking, and the night keeps carrying you. The air turns cooler. The grass dampens the sound of your steps, and the stars blur slightly at the edges, as if the sky is also getting sleepy. You take one deeper breath, then another, and the salt taste becomes faint, like a memory fading into comfort. You are safe. You are held. You are allowed to drift. And when sleep finally takes you, it feels like torchlight dimming on purpose, slow, warm, and perfectly unafraid. Let the sea breathe for you. Let the stone keep its secrets. Let night finish the rest. End of story. Sweet dreams.